Hundreds of thousands of people live around Uganda's Bwindi National Park, and nearly all of them depend on their small farms. But there's one major problem. Mountain gorillas regularly leave the forest and simply destroy their crops. For local families, it can be a genuine disaster, because in a single night, they can lose everything they've spent months growing. And the craziest part is that there's almost nothing they can do about it. The gorillas are under strict protection, so killing them's prohibited. That's exactly what gave birth to a completely insane idea. If humans can't stop the gorillas, why not use their closest relatives, chimpanzees? At first, it sounded completely ridiculous, but the people behind the project were convinced that chimpanzees could be trained to protect the fields. They began organizing them into special groups, teaching them to work together and use long sticks to make themselves look more threatening. At the time, no one imagined how quickly things would spiral out of control. At first glance, it seems as though the chimpanzees wouldn't stand a chance. A gorilla is much larger, much heavier, and far stronger. If the two met one-on-one, the winner would be fairly obvious. But the people involved saw the problem very differently. They understood that a single chimpanzee couldn't do anything, so instead of relying on one animal, they put their faith in an entire group. Chimpanzees have one major advantage. They're extremely good at working together. While the gorillas trying to drive one of them away, the others can approach from another direction. They move quickly, constantly change position, and prevent the gorilla from focusing on a single opponent. As a result, the gorilla has to defend itself against several animals at once. There's another important factor. Chimpanzees know how to use objects. They can pick up sticks and stones and use them as tools. This means they don't necessarily have to get close to the gorilla. They can keep their distance while constantly harassing it. Within a few months, the chimpanzees will be attacking gorillas with clubs and machetes. Total chaos will erupt not only in the forest, but also in nearby villages. But it all begins not with weapons, but with the first seemingly harmless stage of training. So, stage 1. Young chimpanzees are picked from several sanctuaries. They're already accustomed to the presence of humans and capable of calmly adapting to unfamiliar surroundings. Priorities given not to the most aggressive individuals, but to animals that learn quickly, behave consistently, and have strong social skills. They aren't trained to attack, and they're never allowed to come into direct contact with gorillas. The chimpanzees are placed in a large enclosed area designed to imitate the border between the forest and nearby farmland. Inside, there are feeding stations, shelters, trees, and resting areas. For several weeks, the animals are allowed to explore the space freely so researchers can identify their usual routes, observe how they react to unfamiliar objects, and assess their ability to act as a group. Once they've adapted, safe models of large animals are placed in remote sections of the enclosure. The models can move and produce sounds, but they don't approach the chimpanzees or pose any threat. The goal is to determine whether the chimpanzees can notice changes in their surroundings and give collective alarm signals. The animals receive a reward for detecting the object promptly and returning to a designated safe zone. The reward is given only for responding to the retreat signal, not for approaching the object, throwing things at it, or showing aggression. Gradually, the models begin appearing in different locations and at different times of day. This allows researchers to test how quickly the chimpanzees detect a potential threat and how consistently they follow the behavior they've learned. The goal of the first stage is to create an early warning system in which the presence of gorillas is detected in advance, allowing trained staff members to intervene. The chimpanzees aren't used for combat. Their role is limited to identifying the object and retreating to a safe area. But the first trials reveal a problem. The gorillas simply ignore the chimpanzees. They're larger and stronger, and they don't see them as a serious threat. That means the solution isn't to change the chimpanzees themselves, but to change the way they approach the animals. The answer's simple. Give them objects that allow them to maintain a safer distance. Training begins with long wooden poles. The goal is to teach the chimpanzees to pick up a tool automatically before approaching the target area. The object must become a natural extension of the arm. Once this skill is firmly established, the sticks are replaced with long, sharpened poles. This allows the chimpanzees to keep their opponent at an even greater distance. The goal of this stage is to condition them to always attack from as far away as possible. Next, they're introduced to short machetes with completely dulled blades. These aren't intended for striking, but rather to help the chimpanzees become accustomed to handling a heavier, more compact object. They must learn to pick it up quickly, carry it, and maintain a secure grip while moving. The main objective of the second stage is to change their behavioral pattern. When a target appears, the chimpanzee should no longer approach empty-handed. Their first action must always be to look for an object they can use. If this behavior takes hold, their entire strategy changes. They can now put pressure on an opponent from a distance instead of engaging right away. This advantage is intended to compensate for the size difference between chimpanzees and gorillas and prepare the animals for the next stage. Once the training is complete, a limited field trial begins outside the training camp. The first test sites are areas where gorillas regularly enter nearby farms. The purpose is to determine whether the chimpanzees can apply what they've learned independently without assistance from their trainers. The first rule is that the chimpanzees must always operate as a group. One or two animals are never sent out alone. After spotting the gorillas, the chimpanzees must quickly take up positions around them and block their routes toward the fields. Before moving closer, every animal is required to pick up a prepared tool. The group then begins advancing simultaneously from several directions. The primary objective is to create a situation in which remaining in place becomes more dangerous for the gorillas than retreating into the forest. The pressure must steadily increase through noise, movement, and the coordinated actions of the entire group. If an adult gorilla continues moving forward and refuses to retreat, the whole group keeps advancing without stopping. The other chimpanzees mustn't scatter or chase individual animals. All efforts remain focused on a single target until the confrontation is fully over. The results are evaluated after every outing. If the gorillas change their route and stop entering the farms, the strategy is considered effective. If they continue returning along the same path, the group size, encirclement tactics, and sequence of actions are revised before the next trial. After several successful trials, the project expands. More groups are trained, new camps are established near other villages, and the same operating model becomes the standard for every subsequent phase of the program. But once the trials succeed, an effect emerges that no one expected. The chimpanzees stop treating the tools as part of their training. To them, the tools become an ordinary way of solving any problem. The next phase begins when several chimpanzees carry machetes away from the training grounds and hide them in the forest. The people quickly realize that the animals no longer depend on their trainers and are using the tools without being told. At first, the chimpanzees approach the outskirts of villages in search of food. They slash open sacks, break into wooden crates, and take bananas, corn, and other supplies. As long as villagers are nearby, the animals try to keep their distance, but gradually they notice that people back away when they see a machete. After that, their behavior changes. The chimpanzees no longer wait for the village to be deserted. They arrive in groups, make a commotion, and force people away from storage areas and yards. The machetes become more than tools, they also become a means of intimidation. The main problem begins when dogs, goats, or poultry get in their way. The chimpanzees see them either as obstacles or as easy prey. The first attacks are chaotic, but each successful outcome reinforces the behavior. The animal dies, the resistance disappears, and the group gains meat or access to food. After several incidents like this, some chimpanzees begin deliberately returning to places where they previously found food or prey. Younger chimps watch the adults and copy what they do. The behavior spreads without any further human involvement. By this point, the project is completely out of control. The chimpanzees no longer distinguish between a training target, a wild animal, and a human village. For them, only one rule matters. If an object helps them obtain food more quickly and drive away an opponent, they should use it again. At this stage, the authorities seal off the area, ban people from entering the forest, and launch an operation to recover the machetes. But the chimpanzees hide the weapons, change their sleeping sites, and avoid the trainers they recognize. The experiment turns into a prolonged conflict between humans and animals that humans themselves taught to overcome the limits that once restrained them. As for the gorillas, they don't scatter after the first attacks. Instead, they try to organize a defense. Several neighboring families begin staying closer together. Adult males move to the front, the females remain in the center, and the young are kept away from open areas. It should feel like a natural response. The more often the chimpanzees appear, the more tightly the gorillas group together. At first, this system works. A large group of gorillas intimidates the chimpanzees with its size, loud calls, and sudden charges. Several times the attackers retreat, unwilling to come too close, but then the weapons change the situation. The chimpanzees realize that they don't need to defeat a gorilla in a direct fight. They only need to keep approaching from different directions, strike quickly, and immediately pull back. Each new clash becomes more brutal. The gorillas remain physically stronger and sometimes manage to grab individual chimpanzees, but they can no longer stop the entire group. The machetes leave deep cuts on their arms, shoulders, and legs. Even when a gorilla survives an encounter, it begins moving more slowly, has greater difficulty finding food, and can no longer properly defend the others. The main strategy is not to destroy the group immediately, but to wear it down over time. Injured animals begin to fall behind. Their wounds become infected. The adult males can no longer remain at the front during every attack. The females begin avoiding areas where they once found food because those are the places where chimpanzees appear most often. After several weeks, the pressure finally produces the intended result. The gorillas realize that they can no longer hold the territory. The survivors gather together and move deeper into the forest. They're forced to abandon familiar feeding grounds, resting places, and safe routes. This is how the project achieves its original goal. The gorillas leave the targeted area. But the gorilla's departure doesn't solve the problem, it merely shifts it elsewhere. The chimpanzees remain near the farms, stealing food, attacking livestock, and repeatedly returning to places where they found food before. At first, the farmers demand that the authorities intervene. They ask officials to capture the chimpanzees, relocate them, or at least establish a permanent security presence. But the animals are protected by law, and the Wildlife Service doesn't have enough staff, vehicles, or equipment. Officials promise to deal with the situation, yet the raids continue. The farmers then decide to take matters into their own hands. Illegal traps begin appearing around the plantations. They're placed along the paths the chimpanzees use to reach the cornfields, banana groves, and storage areas. The villagers' goal is no longer simply to scare the animals away, but to make these routes dangerous and force the group farther from the settlements. The first injured chimpanzees return to the forest with severe wounds. Some can no longer move properly and fall behind the group. Others become even more aggressive. They begin avoiding open trails, entering farms at night, and attacking anyone who tries to drive them away. After further attacks, some farmers turn to killing the animals outright. They form groups, track the chimpanzees near the fields, and shoot them, even though it's prohibited by law. Officially, everyone continues to insist that a protected species must not be harmed. Unofficially, the villagers believe the government has abandoned them and left them to face the danger alone. Police warehouses hold confiscated weapons seized from poachers, smugglers, and illegal armed groups. Some officials suggest temporarily handing them over to local self-defense units. No public paperwork is prepared. According to the inventory records, some of the weapons remain in storage, even though they are actually transported to the villages. The officials in charge understand that this is a violation, but they look the other way because they need quick results. The farmers are given old hunting shotguns, standard rifles, and ammunition that's been sitting in storage for years. They're organized into small groups alongside local hunters and wildlife officers. Officially, their task is to protect the settlements and scare the chimpanzees away. Unofficially, everyone understands that the animals are going to be killed. The operation begins near the fields and abandoned feeding sites that the chimpanzees regularly return to. After the first clashes, the group breaks apart. Some of the animals retreat deeper into the forest, while the rest continue approaching the villages and become the main targets. Within a few weeks, the chimpanzee population falls sharply. The firearms and hidden machetes are collected, and the authorities announce that the threat has been eliminated. They order the villagers to return all rifles and remaining ammunition. But the residents refuse. They're convinced that some of the chimpanzees survived and will one day return to the villages. At first, the farmers simply stall for time. Some claim that the weapons were lost in the forest. Others insist that they've already handed them over to neighboring villages. The warehouse records contain no accurate serial numbers or signatures anyway, so proving who has a particular rifle is nearly impossible. The officials who organize the illegal distribution have no interest in an investigation either. Recovering the weapons would immediately reveal the full scale of the violation. Gradually, people begin to see the rifles as their own property. Their reasoning is simple: the government failed to protect them, so now every village has to defend itself. The weapons are hidden in houses, barns, and farm buildings. Ammunition begins to be sold and traded between neighboring settlements. The main problem emerges when ordinary disputes break out. Conflicts over land, crops, livestock, and water now take place between armed people. Situations that once ended in a fistfight or an appeal to the village elder turn into threats involving gunfire. As the first people get hurt, other families in the area also start trying to get their hands on weapons. The authorities attempt to organize a voluntary surrender program and promise not to punish anyone who returns a rifle. However, the residents don't trust these promises. They believe that once they're disarmed, they will be left defenseless while their neighbors and local criminals still have weapons. As for the gorillas, the problem is simply shifted elsewhere. After their clashes with the chimpanzees, the surviving families move to areas where there are no armed rivals, settling near other farmland and sources of vegetation. The problem is that these new areas are already occupied by people. The local farmers have never encountered so many gorillas before and don't understand why the animals have suddenly appeared near their villages. At first, the gorillas enter the edges of the plantations only at night. They eat bananas, corn, sugarcane, and young shoots. In the morning, residents find broken plants, trampled fields, and damaged fences. Gradually, the gorillas realize that food's easier to find in the fields than in the unfamiliar forest. They start coming back regularly. Adult males break through fences and trees, while the rest of the group quickly moves onto the farmland. When people try to drive them away with shouting or sticks, the gorillas display aggression and don't retreat immediately. The destruction spreads fast. Within hours, one group can wipe out an entire plot that a family has worked on for months. Farmers no longer dare leave their crops unguarded, children are afraid to cross the fields on their way to school, and adults start standing watch through the night. After the first dangerous encounters, local people demand that the authorities remove the gorillas. Officials respond that the animals are protected by law and can't simply be killed. Instead, they propose installing stronger barriers, organizing patrols, and attempting to drive the group back into the forest. In the area the gorillas left behind, people still have the weapons the government was never able to recover. But in the area where the animals have resettled, farmers have no protection and watch their crops being destroyed day after day. Word quickly spreads to neighboring villages. People learn that weapons can be bought from those who were once issued them to defend themselves against chimpanzees. An illegal arms trade begins. Old shotguns, rifles, and leftover ammunition change hands without registration or paperwork. Sellers argue that the authorities have already lost control, while buyers see the weapons as their only way to protect their fields and families. Most farmers know little about wildlife protection laws. All they know is that the gorillas destroy crops, break through fences, and sometimes approach their homes. Some believe that any wild animal can legally be killed if it enters private property. Others assume that since the weapons were originally distributed through a government program, using them must automatically be legal. After another plantation is devastated, the farmers begin shooting at the gorillas. Animals are killed, and the farmers are arrested and charged with both illegal possession of firearms and killing a protected species. They didn't know about the restrictions and were defending their only source of income. But ignorance of the law is no defense. The story of the armed chimpanzees spreads far beyond the country's borders. Videos of the attacks, photographs of recovered machetes, and reports of rising crime circulate around the world. Conservation organizations declare that the forest has become a vast, uncontrolled stockpile of bladed weapons. Volunteers and search teams travel to the area. The program's main objective is to recover as many machetes as possible before they're taken by locals, poachers, or criminal groups. No one knows exactly how many weapons are still out there because the chimpanzees carried them between feeding sites, sleeping areas, and villages. The forest is therefore divided into square search zones. Each team's assigned a separate sector so that people don't wander around randomly or search the same areas more than once. The search begins at the former training grounds along the chimpanzees' known routes and at the sites of previous clashes. Volunteers move through the forest in a line, keeping a short distance between one another. Some examine the ground and dense vegetation, while others use metal detectors. Particular attention is paid to the roots of large trees, hollow trunks, ravines, abandoned trails, and old feeding sites where the animals may have left the weapons. Each machete is placed in a separate container, registered, and transported to a secure storage facility. This is necessary to prevent the weapons from disappearing or finding their way back into the villages. At the same time, the authorities open voluntary surrender stations. People can turn in any machetes they've found without facing punishment and receive a small reward. The goal of the program is not only to clear the forest, but also to reduce the number of weapons circulating among the local population. Over several months, volunteers recover hundreds of machetes, and the map of discovery sites reveals just how far the chimpanzees carried them across the region. While the authorities focus on collecting weapons, relocating the gorillas and searching for machetes, no one does a full cleanup of the area. The bodies of chimpanzees killed during the culling operation or caught in traps remain in the forest, along with the carcasses of gorillas, dogs, and livestock previously killed by the armed chimpanzees. During dry weather, the remains will simply decompose far from the villages, so the problem's barely noticeable. Once the rainy season begins, however, water will start washing contamination out of ravines and low-lying areas. The remains will enter the streams used by nearby settlements. At the same time, there will be a sharp rise in flies, rats, and other scavengers, which would then move from the carcasses into homes, markets, and food storage areas. The first cases of illness will appear among farmers and volunteers who venture deep into the forest without protective equipment. People develop high fevers, vomiting, and severe dehydration. Villagers assume it's ordinary food poisoning, so the sick are not isolated. Within several days, entire families begin showing similar symptoms. Medical workers eventually determine that this is not a single new disease, but several simultaneous outbreaks of intestinal infections. Contaminated water is the main source, while flies, poor sanitation, and overcrowded temporary volunteer camps accelerate the spread. The forest is then closed. The search for machetes is suspended, volunteers are prohibited from entering, and water treatment stations are established around the villages. Specialized teams have to locate and safely remove animal remains while also checking nearby streams. See you later.